Scotland to put the problem under the microscope. In a moment, we'll hear from the campaigner behind those efforts, but first, here's Sharon Frew.
Alice Ruggles was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. Trimman Dillon, a soldier from Edinburgh, had refused to accept the relationship was over. Just days before the killing, Alice made this phone call to Northumbria police to complain about his obsessive behaviour.
So I split up with my boyfriend about 3 months ago. Since then, I know that he's hacked into my Facebook and also my phone. He's been sending me a lot of messages even though I've asked him not to contact me. He's come round the back, knocked on my bedroom window. I just feel a bit shaken up tonight.
On the 12th of October last year, Dillon left his barracks in Pennycook and drove to Alice's Newcastle flat. He broke in and murdered the 24-year-old. Yesterday he was jailed for a minimum of 22 years.
Only 2 days before, I'd been talking to Alice on the phone and she told me about the whole thing. And I sort of reassured her that was okay and that if she just ignored him, he would ignore her. And I only put the phone down for 10 minutes. And Emma rang and said, "Mum, you cannot tell that to her. He's going to kill her." And I thought she was overreacting. And I felt such a sense of guilt. It's not being silly at all. It's been realistic.
Understanding the changing nature of stalking was just one of the issues discussed by experts in Glasgow. Campaigners acknowledge the authorities have made progress over the last decade, but they say much more is needed. 1 in 6 people experience stalking in the last 12 months. It can take many forms and affect any age.
Stalking is not harassment. I've been stalked 3 times and I can tell you it brings you to your knees, it can bring you to the point of suicide. It's not anything like harassment, and well done Scotland, you've separated the law, and that's what we are pushing for in England.
Alice's parents have now set up a trust to raise awareness. Following Dillon's conviction, Northumbria police say it will revisit its training for officers and will carefully consider whether improvements can be made.
Well, we're joined by Anne Moulds, who's the founder of Action Against Stalking. She was once a victim of it herself. And by Hamish Brown, a former detective inspector at Scotland Yard and a leading authority on stalking cases. Thank you both so much for joining us this evening. Anne, as we said in the introduction, you were a victim of stalking. What kind of effect did it have on you?
It was the psychological impact, the mental abuse, living with uncertainty, huge anxiety. I actually I became so scared that I didn't want to leave my home. It impacted on my work. It also impacted on my physical health as well. Mental health and physical health are interrelated. So lost hair, lost weight, gum abscesses, migraines. My whole life just seemed to be crumbling.
And what was the very worst point for you, Anne?
The worst point was when it was actually no one seemed to believe me every time I reported to the police or asked for help. No one seemed to understand what I was going through, the fears. They didn't recognise this type of behaviour within criminal law at that time.
And it is a big problem. I was shocked to see that 16% of the population it affects. I was really shocked by that.
Yes, and I think that's still only the tip of the iceberg, because only 20% of victims are reporting.
Hamish, do you think the laws are vigorous enough?
I think, in principle, the laws are excellent. They're there to be used. Where the police have fallen down, particularly south of the border, is they haven't got that awareness, they haven't got that training, and they've really got to look to Scotland, and good on Scotland. They've really got their act together. Not only the judicial system, but working closely with the police, the support of senior officers and the training. The South has a lot to learn, and I say good for Scotland, very, very encouraging.
As Anne said there, this could just be the tip of the iceberg because people are not coming forward for whatever reason. Why aren't people coming forward?
Well, I think we've got to take into account that the acts of stalking very often are crimes in themselves. For example, it's not an offence to stand outside your house all day or constantly follow someone around, but that can be very upsetting, a sort of fear of violence, alarm or distress for the actual victim. But people in the cold light of day say, well, that's not a crime. Well, it is, and there's something that can be done, so please report it.
But is it difficult to kind of define it? Sorry, Anne.
Well, I also have victims who contact me asking for help, and they're scared to report to the police. They're scared that they will not be believed. They're scared that if they do report to the police that it's going to trigger their stalker to escalate and it's going to make matters worse for them. And that's why it's so important as soon as these victims do pluck up that courage to report to police, because that's a risk for victims, that when they do report, the police respond appropriately and effectively.
And are they at the moment?
Well, we're getting... Scotland has a very robust stalking protocol, and it's backed up by training, the Crown Office training. So we've delivered... In Scotland, stalking is a priority listed crime, and that's been backed up by training at national level.
And is it difficult then to define what stalking is? Is there a fine line perhaps in some cases, Hamish?
Well, it's this alarm or distress. That's what it's about. It's at least two acts that causes alarm or distress, and the person knows that there's a guilty knowledge. And this is what's got to be drummed into the police, but it's got to come from the highest level, from the National Police Chiefs Council, which is clearly happening in Scotland, but been let down, really, in England and Wales. And I want to see these people held to account. Why aren't you doing your job, and why aren't you getting the message out? And it should be a priority. We hear far too often about tragedies that follow when the police have not acted, so they really have to do much better. But I say they perhaps look at Scotland, look at the liaison between the police and the judiciary, and indeed the support groups such as Anne's, and move on from there.
The conference you had today, bringing experts together from around the UK, how helpful has that been? What's it achieved, do you think, today, Anne?
Well, it's looking at practices across the board, about trying to start these discussions about standardising practices, the models of best practice. It's about deepening that knowledge, understanding what is stalking, what constitutes it. It's a very high calibre conference. We had some of all the delegates were professionals scanning across criminal justice, NHS, victim support services, Crown Office, but we also had some of the top key experts. So it's about imparting that knowledge, understanding and sharing best practice.
Of course, there has been this huge explosion in social media. That presumably makes it easier for stalkers to stalk their victims. Do you need to find new ways to kind of combat them because of social media?
Well, I think the message has got to go out that stalking in whatever form is a crime. And there's no difference between cyber stalking to leaving unwanted presents, for example. It's just another means of carrying out the act. And people have got to be careful, of course, themselves. You don't leave your door open when you go on holiday, but at the same time, don't put things on the internet that might cause a few problems for yourself. So some safety first isn't a bad idea. The internet's there, but just be careful.
Anne, what do you think about the social media aspect?
Well, what we're finding is more and more young people are falling prey to stalkers because they are one of the biggest users of the internet. We know about the sexual predatory stalker online, the stranger online, scanning for their next victim, fake profiles, fake emails. So it's a huge problem, especially for our young people, and these are the people we need to reach.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for coming on this evening, and thanks. Nice to see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, it's time for a roundup of the